78. That's the break-even age. The point where waiting until 70 to claim Social Security finally beats taking it at 62. You've heard that number in every video on this subject, and is the single number that talks most people out of claiming early. It's wrong. Not off by a little. It comes from a calculation that leaves out the largest cost of waiting, a cost that never shows up on your Social Security statement because it happens in your brokerage account instead. Put it back in, and that break even moves by roughly 6 years. 6 years is enough to flip this decision for a lot of people watching right now. So, I'm going to hand you the corrected math and 5 situations where taking it at 62 is the right answer rather than the impatient one. But I'll be straight with you first. There is also a version of claiming early that I think is close to indefensible. And if you're the higher earner in your marriage, it's almost certainly the version you're leaning toward. That one doesn't cost you. It costs whoever outlives you, and it costs them for the rest of their life. Your full retirement age is now 67 if you were born in 1960 or later. That phase-in is complete. There's no more sliding scale for anyone still deciding. At 67, you receive 100% of what's called your primary insurance amount, your full benefit. Claim at 62, and you get about 70% of it, a permanent reduction of roughly 30%. Delay past 67, and you earn about 8% more per year, up to age 70. Wait all the way, and you land near 124% of your full benefit. So the spread between the earliest and latest claim is enormous. Someone with a full benefit of $2,400 a month at 67 would get roughly $1,680 at 62 and roughly $2,976 at 70. That's a difference of about $1,300 a month for life, indexed to inflation. Stated that way, waiting looks obvious, and for a lot of people, it is. But notice what that framing does. It compares the two monthly numbers and stops. It never asks you the question, which is, how much total money do you collect, and how many years of your life do you spend collecting it? Because the person who claims at 62 for 8 years, while the person waiting to 70 collects nothing. By the time the late claimer gets their first check, the early claimer has already banked around $160,000. That's the part the monthly comparison hides, and it's where the real analysis starts. If that reframe is useful, hit like and subscribe. I do these kinds of videos without a house position to sell, which matters on a topic where most of the confident advice comes from people who benefit from you having a bigger portfolio. Okay, let's do the break-even properly. The break-even age is where the total collected by the late claimer finally catches up to the total collected by the early claimer. Do it the simple way, just adding up checks, and you get somewhere around age 78 to 80. Live past that, and waiting wins. Die before it, and claiming early wins. That's the number you'll see quoted everywhere, and it's wrong in two directions that mostly cancel out, which is why nobody bothers to fix it. But the residual matters, and it favors claiming earlier than most people assume. Error 1. The simple math ignores what the early money does. If you claim at 62 and you don't need the money to live, that's 8 years of checks you can invest. Even at modest returns, that pile compounds. When you account for it, the break-even pushes out, commonly into the low to mid-80s. Error 2. And this is the one nearly everyone misses. The simple math ignores what you didn't have to sell. If you delay to 70, you have to fund those 8 years from somewhere, and that somewhere is usually your portfolio. So delaying doesn't just mean foregoing checks. It means drawing down invested assets during the 8 years those assets would otherwise have been compounding. Think about that carefully, because it inverts the usual framing. Standard advice says delaying buys you an 8% annual increase. but you're purchasing that increase by liquidating a portfolio that also grows. If your portfolio returns 6 or 7% on average, the true premium you're capturing is much smaller than 8%. Put both corrections together, and the honest break even for someone with a healthy invested portfolio typically lands in the low to mid 80s, not 78. Life expectancy for a 62-year-old American today is roughly the low to mid 80s, which means for a very large number of people, this is close to a coin flip, not the obvious slam dunk it's usually presented as. And when a decision is close to a coin flip on the math, the tiebreakers should be the things that aren't on the spreadsheet, which brings us to 5 situations. Situation 1, your health honestly assessed. This is the biggest one and the one people are strangely reluctant to think about clearly. The entire case for delaying rests on living well past the break even. It's longevity insurance. You're buying protection against the risk of living a very long time. That's a real risk and a real product. But insurance you don't need is just an expense. If you have a serious chronic condition, if you've had a significant cardiac event, if there's a strong family pattern of dying in the 70s, if you smoke, the probability distribution you're planning against is not the average American's. Delaying is a bet on the right tail of a curve you may not be standing on. I want to be careful here because people are bad at this in both directions. Plenty of people with a scary diagnosis at 62 live to 90. Medicine is good and getting better. Don't claim early because of a vague sense of doom. But if you've sat down with an actuary and your actual medical history, and the honest answer is meaningfully below average, then delaying is buying insurance against a risk you're less exposed to, while giving up 8 years of guaranteed payments you'd very likely collect. In that case, 62 isn't the impatient choice, it's the correct one. Situation 2. It's what lets you actually stop working. Here's the framing almost nobody puts on this decision, and I think it's the most important one in the whole video. For many people, this isn't a question about money at all. It's a question about years. Say you're 62, you're tired, your body hurts, and you're in a job that's grinding you down. Your portfolio alone can't carry quite your spending, but your portfolio plus a Social Security check at 62 can. The choice in front of you isn't $1,680 a month versus $2,976 a month. It's stop working at 62 or work 5 more years. Those 5 years are not fungible with money. They're 5 years at the healthiest you will ever be again from this point forward. 5 years where you can still hike, still travel comfortably, still get on the floor with a grandchild and get back up. Financially, delaying may well produce a bigger number in your 80s, but the person who benefits from that bigger number is a version of you with less physical capacity to use it. That's a genuine trade, and it is entirely legitimate to decide the early years are worth more. I'm not telling you which side to land on. I'm telling you that the math says wait is not a complete answer to a question that is partly about how you spend the healthiest remaining decade of your life. Situation 3. Protecting the portfolio from sequence risk. This one is more technical, and it's the one financial planners take most seriously. Sequence of returns risk is the danger that a bad market lands early in your retirement while you're withdrawing. Selling shares into a downturn does permanent damage. Those shares are gone and can't participate in the recovery. Now consider what delaying does. From 62 to 70, you're funding your entire life from your portfolio. That's 8 straight years of maximum withdrawal pressure right at the most vulnerable window. Claiming at 62 does the opposite. Every dollar of Social Security is a dollar you don't sell. It reduces your withdrawal rate immediately in the years when a reduced withdrawal rate matters most, and it does so with an income stream that is inflation adjusted and doesn't care what the market did. So there's a real argument that claiming early is the more conservative choice, not the more reckless one. It trades a smaller lifetime benefit for a much lower chance of a portfolio ruin in the first decade. If a 2008 style drop lands when you're 64, you'll be very glad something was coming in that wasn't tied to the market. Situation 4 and 5, the spousal plays. These two are about couples, and they're where the biggest optimization lives. Situation 4, the lower earner claims early while the higher earner delays. This is the strategy most couples should at least look at. The lower earner's benefit is smaller, so the dollar cost of reducing it is smaller. Meanwhile, the higher earner's benefit keeps growing at 8% a year. You get income flowing at 62, and you still build the big benefit. Situation 5. You have no survivor to protect and no interest in leaving a large estate. A single person with no dependents is optimizing it purely for their own lifetime. There's no survivor benefit to preserve, nobody inheriting the larger check. The calculus is simple, and the case for taking the money while you're young enough to enjoy it gets stronger. And one practical note if you're claiming early while still working. There's an earnings test. In 2026, if you're under full retirement age and earn more than about $24,480, they withhold $1 for every $2 above it. In the year you reach FRA, the limit jumps to roughly $65,160 with a $1 for $3 withholding. But here's the part almost everyone gets wrong. That money is not lost. When you hit full retirement age, they recompute your benefit upward to account for what was withheld. It's a deferral, not a penalty. Lots of people avoid claiming early purely because of this rule, and they're avoiding something that isn't what they think it is. The decision you should never make early. Now, the warning, and this is why I structured the video to put it last. Everything above is about your benefit and your lifetime. There's one dimension where claiming early doesn't just affect you, the survivor benefit. When one spouse dies, the survivor keeps the larger of the two benefits, not both. So the higher earner's claiming decision doesn't only set their own income, it sets the floor for whatever the surviving spouse lives on, potentially for decades. If the higher earner claims at 62 and takes that 30% reduction, they've reduced the survivor benefit by 30% too, permanently. And because women on average outlive men, this most often means a widow living into her 90s on a check that was permanently shrunk by a decision made 30 years earlier. So the rule I'd hold to almost no exception. The higher earner in a couple should think very hard before claiming early, and delaying to 70 is often the single best thing they can do for a surviving spouse. The lower earner has much more freedom. That's the asymmetry. Claiming early is a personal decision when you're single, and a joint one when you're not. And if you're a public sector worker, a teacher, firefighter, police officer, one more thing you should know. The Social Security Fairness Act, signed in January 2025, repealed the windfall elimination provision in the government pension offset. Roughly 3.2 public servants had their benefits raised, some by nearly $600 a month. If you last ran your Social Security numbers before 2025 and you have a government pension, every figure you were working from is obsolete. Pull a fresh statement. So, claiming at 62 costs about 30%. The honest break-even is in the low to mid-80s once you account for what you didn't sell. And there are 5 real situations where early wins. Compromised health, when it's what actually buys your freedom, when it protects the portfolio from sequence risk, when you're the lower earner in a couple, and when there's no survivor to protect. And the one place to be extremely careful is the higher earners claim, because that number outlives you, which leads straight into the thing that trips up almost everyone who does retire early, the gap. If you stop working at 62, Medicare doesn't start until 65, and you are buying your own health coverage for 3 years at a price that shocks people. That's the video on screen now, and if you're seriously considering 62, watch it before you decide anything.